Hi, everybody. It's Jessica Stone, and I'm joined by Tom Carroll, the editor of Cannabis Capitalist. And Tom, last month you were hearing from your contacts that the conditions were really going to be right for states to begin looking more seriously at legalizing marijuana use. Now we're hearing the New Mexico governor talk about covering COVID-19 costs with cannabis taxes, and we're also seeing GOP lawmakers in Pennsylvania warm to the idea. In your view, is the case that you heard back then even stronger today than it was back then for investors to put money to work in this space?
Yeah, so it's interesting. And I mean, besides those things that you mentioned right there, we also had the HEROES Act, right, which is the fifth version of COVID stimulus coming out that had the Safe Banking Act attached to it in the House, right? That now sits in the Senate, and there's wild opinion as to whether that will ultimately get cut when the Senate does in fact decide to pick that up. But to me, it's a great data point that suggests there's at least some Congress people that cannabis is on their minds, and cannabis businesses are on their minds because they are suffering not nearly as much as some others, but still it's been tough for them. So we're looking to bring some relief to them through legalization, probably at the state level initially. But it's a great data point that the wheels continue to turn. So that's what we really take away from this.
So one other thing about the beginning of this outbreak is that we saw cannabis be deemed medically necessary, which gave dispensaries the ability to continue to operate. What have we seen that do to stock prices, and is that trajectory likely to continue?
Yeah, that's been a great success story here in the near term. Back in mid-March, we started hearing about the potential for cannabis companies, at least in the United States, to be deemed medically necessary. So made some calls. We called about half of our portfolio holdings. All of them basically said, yes, we believe that's going to be the case. And they continued to see at that time relatively steady sales, even an uptick before we went into kind of the shelter in place rules. So as I've checked in over time, and now we've actually got a couple of earnings reports that have come in, all of that strength and kind of the positive attitude of management teams continued. And we've seen, Green Thumb, Curaleaf, some of our other favorites that have reported really good numbers, revenues up, well into the triple digit percentages, and stocks have followed suit. I mean, ever since we put out that mid-March report, you got names like Curaleaf up 125%, Green Thumb also up well over 100% in a relatively short period of time. And it's nice to see these stocks getting some traction, as well as the SAFE Act being thrown in with HEROES. And I think that's going to continue to move these stocks higher this year for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the sort of steps being taken at the federal level and at the state level, sort of not necessarily coordinated, but in tandem for the same reason, which is revenue. Everybody needs money to pay these costs that COVID is wreaking havoc on our economy. How do you see that sort of general march towards federalization as part of picking up demand again for these stocks?
Yeah. So I think in fact, we're working on a report right now for our next issue, which will come out in June, on all of the states and all of the tax revenues that have come in related just purely to cannabis. So for example, since in the last 7 years, Colorado has raked in over $1 billion in taxes related, just related directly to cannabis, as well as had a flourishing employment environment relative to the emerging industry. So I think as states look at the revenues coming in at these companies, as they look at their compressed finances this year, right, from tax revenues, sales tax revenues, all kinds of sources, I think that is a potential accelerant for both state legalization for states that are on the fence or haven't thought about it, as well as just raising the volume of the issue at the federal level. And that is really going to be key when we start to see a lot more traction at the federal level. And then these stocks are going to absolutely see an inflow of investment from institutional money. So right now there's just not a lot of institutional money there. Once it's allowed to happen, you're going to see a lot of demand for these shares.
And investors will want to be there ahead of those institutional investors, I'm sure. Thanks so much for staying on top of the cannabis beat for us. Tom Carroll there, the editor of Cannabis Capitalist, joining us from his hideaway there during quarantine. Thanks so much. And if you would like to see much more content just like this, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.